A man sleeps with the one he can, but he becomes obsessively attached to the woman who awakens that one feeling in him. And no, it's not what you're thinking right now. Forget everything you believe you know about attraction. Forget magazines, your friends' advice, Hollywood movies. We're not talking here about some secret technique in bed, not about a flawless body or a symmetrical face, not even about being the most open and entertaining woman in the room. That's the beginner's game. Yes, it might catch some looks, but looks are cheap. They vanish faster than they appear. Today is about something much deeper, something invisible. It's about a switch in the brain, a neurological mechanism activated deep in a man's limbic system, a switch so powerful and ancient that it can, within seconds, distinguish between an ordinary encounter and a mental dependency. Have you ever wondered, why did the man who seemed so interested suddenly turn cold as ice? Why did you give everything, were loving, attentive, brilliant in every way, and yet he chose someone else? Or the hardest question of all, why do some women, without much effort and without perfection, manage to trigger an almost irrational loyalty in men, while you feel like you have to fight for every ounce of attention? The answer lies not in what you do, but in what you trigger in him. The real question is not, what can I do to make a man physically desire me? Physical desire is a basic instinct, easy to ignite. The real, life-changing question is, what can you do so that he can't get you out of his head? What is this mental, invisible and silent drug that separates women who are liked from women who are unforgettable? What I'm about to reveal to you in the next few minutes is not a seduction trick. It's a secret of male psychology, confirmed by neuroscience and evolutionary biology. A concept that, once you understand it, gives you tremendous power, because the male body always follows the mind. And his mind, believe me, is not looking for what everyone else is offering. He's looking for something much rarer, something you probably already carry within you, but don't yet know how to use. Stay with me, and I promise you, you will never look at attraction the same way again. We are facing a paradoxical puzzle that occupies many women. On the one hand, pop culture tells us that we need a whole catalogue of traits to attract a man: beauty, a toned body, charm, good sex. The list seems endless, and it forces us to become a perfect product. That's why many women try hard, investing time, energy, and emotions to meet that ideal. But then in real life, something happens that makes no sense. We see seemingly perfect relationships break apart. Men lose interest in women who, on paper, are a perfect 10. And at the same time, we see women who do not match that ideal, yet inspire devotion and desire that turns into obsession. Why? Because we've been trying to open the wrong door. For decades, our focus has been on the door of physical attraction, the body, the visible. And we have completely overlooked the existence of another door, a door that is much more important and much better guarded, the door to the male mind. And that's exactly where the key to everything lies. The difference between one night and a lifelong bond, between the woman who is an option and the woman who is a priority, between the woman who is one of many and the woman who is the only one, all of that is decided not in bed. It is decided on the quiet, invisible battlefield of his mind. In his brain, there is a filter, an extremely selective gatekeeper. This gatekeeper receives all experiences and interactions with you and makes a brutal, binary decision. He decides whether the experience is interchangeable, something pleasant but fleeting, stored in short-term memory and forgotten, or whether it contains a special element, a catalyst, that marks it as decisive. When that happens, the experience passes through the filter, becomes anchored in long-term memory, and more importantly, it activates the centers for deep desire and reward. The problem is that most known seduction strategies only try to satisfy this gatekeeper temporarily, for one night, but they have no idea how to give him that secret ingredient that opens the main door. That's why this subject is so important, because when you understand it, you free yourself from the exhausting race for outer perfection. You no longer have to twist yourself or be someone else. Instead, you can direct your energy to where it really makes a difference, to a connection that lasts. What we are revealing here is the nature of this catalyst, the chemical composition of this mental drug. I will explain exactly what it is, why the male brain responds to it biologically, and above all, how you can start producing it naturally, without games, without tricks, and without losing yourself. This is my promise. If you stay, you will not only learn a new word or concept, you will understand the operating system of male desire on a level that 99% of people completely ignore. And this knowledge is power, the power to truly touch. So what is this mental drug? What is this secret ingredient that breaks through all of a man's defenses and settles directly in his innermost control center? The answer is a single word, and probably not the one you expect. It is not passion, it is not mystery, it is not beauty. The word is admiration. I know what you might be thinking now. Admiration sounds a bit cold, not exactly sexy. It seems more like something you feel for a mentor or boss, not for a partner. And it is exactly in this misunderstanding that its secret power lies. To understand why admiration is the fuel for the deepest male desire, we need to take a brief look inside his mind, into his most basic programming. From an evolutionary and psychological perspective, a man is wired to seek, to fight, and to conquer, not only physically, but also in terms of status, hierarchy, and life purpose. He has a deep, innate need to feel competent, good at what he does, to create something, and to protect. Physical attraction is only the first step, a spark. He sees you, and his instinct shouts, "I want her." It is a desire to possess, one-sided but superficial, and it can disappear just as quickly as it appeared. Admiration, on the other hand, changes everything. In the moment, a man admires you for something beyond your appearance, your intelligence, the passion with which you speak about your work, your integrity, your wit, the calm with which you handle a crisis, or your dedication to a hobby he's not even interested in. Something happens on a chemical level. His desire shifts from, "I want her," to, "Am I good enough for her?" Suddenly, the balance of power changes. He is no longer the hunter pursuing prey. Now he is facing a woman who has her own realm, her own value, her own light. You are no longer merely desired, you become an inspiration. And that feeling is incredibly powerful for a man. It is the difference between "I want to sleep with her" and "I want to be able to stand by her side." Think about it. Physical desire wants to possess. Admiration wants to merge. He doesn't just want to have you, he wants to understand you, to learn from you, to take some of your magic into himself. That doesn't mean you have to be a CEO or a NASA scientist. Admiration has nothing to do with monumental achievements. It's about authenticity and passion. It's the glow in your eyes when you talk about books that have changed your life. It's the conviction with which you express your opinion at dinner, even if everyone else disagrees. It's the moment when he laughs because you are intensely focused on trying to assemble a piece of furniture, frustrated but determined. In these moments, he doesn't just see an attractive woman, he sees a fascinating, independent person. And his archaic brain, thirsty for challenge and meaning, kicks in. Attraction suddenly stops being a game, it becomes a mission. But here arises the real dilemma, the trap we almost all fall into. If admiration is such a powerful driver of male desire, why does society and our own fears make us do exactly the opposite? Why are we taught to make ourselves smaller, to not shine too brightly so as not to scare off men? And it is in this contradiction that attraction dies, because we are faced with an uncomfortable truth. The strongest driver of male attraction is admiration. But right next to this truth lives a huge destructive myth. A myth whispered to us since childhood, one we've seen in thousands of movies and eventually accepted as universal truth. It goes, don't be too smart, don't be too successful, don't be too independent, because otherwise you'll scare men away and end up alone. Does that sound familiar? It is one of the most paralyzing lies told to generations of women, and it traps us. In order to be desirable, you must stop being admirable. But here comes the twist. This myth is not entirely false, but it is fatally misinterpreted. And in this false interpretation, we sabotage ourselves. The truth is, a man of real value is not afraid of your strength. He only withdraws if you treat him like an opponent. He doesn't fear your intelligence. He feels drained if you use it like a weapon against him. Your success does not scare him, but if you use it to belittle his, he will lose interest. Think of it this way. Male energy is naturally oriented toward competition, problem-solving, and progress. When a man approaches you on a romantic level, he seeks polarity, a feminine energy that complements his, not fights it. If, however, a woman in trying to prove her worth goes into combat mode, arguing to win, constantly correcting, undermining his opinion, competing over who is smarter or more successful, then he no longer sees her as a potential partner, but as a rival. And sexual polarity, that magnetic spark between masculinity and femininity, dies instantly. Let me tell you a short story. Take Sophia. Sophia is a brilliant woman, a successful executive, educated, independent, and she constantly complains that men can't handle successful women. On her dates, she talks at length about her achievements, her travels, her bonuses. If her date talks about an achievement at work, she immediately counters with one of her own, twice as big. If he expresses a political opinion, she dismantles it with arguments until he is left speechless. Sophia thinks she is showing her worth, presenting herself as an admirable woman. But men leave these dates not thinking, "Wow, what an amazing woman," but feeling, "That was exhausting, like a job interview I didn't apply for." Or worse, like a court trial. Men are not intimidated by your success. They feel judged, evaluated, and ultimately unnecessary. But what happened later in Sophia's life is even more revealing. She met a man who kept up with her pace, or rather, settled comfortably into it. A passive man without ambition, who felt comfortable in Sophia's shadow. And over time, she lost all respect and attraction for him. Because the moment he dialed down his own masculine energy just to stay with her, he stopped being the man she could admire. He became the living proof of her own trap. Let's think about Laura, equally successful, equally smart, but with a different energy. When she talks about her successes, she does so with a passion that inspires, not with arrogance. And above all, she is genuinely interested in his world. She asks about his challenges, his passions, listens. She doesn't see him as competition, but as a fascinating universe. Her confidence doesn't dim another's light in order to shine. Her strength is warm, magnetic, an invitation. Men don't run from Laura. They line up to be part of her world. Because she doesn't make them smaller, she inspires them to become bigger. This destroys the myth that you have to make yourself small. Never. But here, the dilemma becomes more complex. What if you are like Laura, strong, warm, and he still feels insecure? Is that your fault? Should you dim your light to protect his insecurity? Here is where everything explodes. We are at the point of no return. You have done everything right. Strong yet gentle. Smart, but not condescending. Your own realm, with an open door. And still, in his gaze, in his silence, in his cutting remarks, you sense that your strength bothers him. Your success makes him feel small. The crucial question: should you make yourself smaller to fit into his world? Dim your light so his insecurity is less visible? The answer? A clear, uncompromising no. Never. And this is not an empty slogan, somehow. It is the most important strategic insight for your choice of partner. Because exactly at the moment you try to shrink yourself for him, you are not in a crisis. You are facing the best filter to distinguish a valuable man from a frightened boy in the body of an adult. A low-value man feels in the light of a strong woman like a vampire at sunrise. Your light doesn't inspire him. It burns. It illuminates his fears, his insecurity, his lack of ambition. And then he has two options: grow or pull you into the darkness. He will try to dim your light with jokes, doubts, guilt, by calling you intimidating or too intense. When a man does that, he's handing you his resignation. He's showing you, I'm not the right one, and you should thank him and leave. But a high-value man, a true man, reacts to your light with fascination. Your success motivates him. Your intelligence excites him. Your independence attracts him like a magnet. To him, you are not a threat. You are an honorable challenge. The summit a mountaineer wants to climb. The work of art a connoisseur wants to understand. Here lies the deepest secret of male desire. Not the sight of a naked woman, that's animalistic. Simple, rather. A woman, fully clothed, in her element, burning with passion, absorbed in her world. And he quietly thinks, my God, I want to be worthy to stand by her side. Not, I want to have her. Not, I want to get her into bed. But, I want to become better because of her. Then it's no longer just about you. It's about who he wants to become, to be close to you. This is the strongest drug in the world. He's not addicted to you, but to the best version of himself that you awaken in him. You are the lighthouse. You repel the wrong ones and attract the right ones. How do you apply this in everyday life? Not through tactics, but through a radical change of direction. Stop asking, what does he like? Ask yourself, what ignites me? Forget for a moment about men, dates, attraction. Instead, ask yourself these questions, quietly, just for you. What topic makes you talk so much you almost lose your breath? What activity engages you so much that you don't look at your phone for hours? What injustice in the world ignites a fire in your belly? What unpopular opinion would you defend with passion and clear arguments? What is your nerd side? That one strange obsession, maybe ancient Roman history, specialty coffee, or the films of a Korean director that you usually keep to yourself because you think no one cares? That is where your gold lies. These are the ingredients of the mental drug we talked about. Your task is not to invent something, but to rediscover, unearth, and be proud of what's already within you. The second step is to understand that it's not about informing, but about transmitting. You don't go on a date to recite your resume. Hi, I like climbing, Stoic philosophy, and art house films. That's a report. Boring. It's about making your passion felt. If you're talking about films, say, that one scene completely fascinated me because of the lighting. Look how the director did it. Or suggest a meeting yourself. Hey, there's an antiquarian book market in the city on Saturday. Want to go? I love the smell of old books. It's about letting your energy fill the room. You don't have to wonder if he likes books. What will fascinate him is your enthusiasm for them. So what should you avoid from now on? Stop suppressing your honest opinion just to avoid conflict, pretending you love football when you're bored to death, playing the helpless girl so he can save you. Becoming his personal cheerleader while your own dreams gather dust. And what should you start doing? Fiercely defend your time for your projects and hobbies. Stop constantly sacrificing your social life for him. Don't be afraid of discussions. I disagree. I see it this way. Show your path, with setbacks included. I'm trying to learn programming right now. Nothing worked today, but tomorrow I'll try again. Be the main character in your own movie. He can be a great co-star, but never the director. I know this path is scary, because it guarantees one thing: some men will leave. Maybe men you feel physically attracted to. They'll feel intimidated or simply won't connect. But you must understand, this is not failure. It's a clear victory of your new filter. Every man who leaves because your light is too bright saves you months or years with the wrong one. And above all, he makes space for the right one, for the one who can not only stay, but who actively seeks exactly that. The ingredients for this admiration drug are not found in a lingerie shop, but in your bookshelf. in conversation with a friend who challenges you, in the business plan lying in your drawer, on your next solo trip. Start tending your garden, not to attract butterflies, but so that it becomes so spectacular that only the best butterflies can't resist coming by. We've come a long way together. We've debunked the myth of intimidation. We've discovered the nuclear power of admiration. I've shown you how to tend your own garden and become the woman who works like a living filter. But if you think this is just a strategy to attract men, you're missing 90% of the treasure. You're missing the true core of this journey. Because at the end of the day, it was never really about him, it was about you. It was always about you. We've spent our lives turning our heads sideways, outward, seeking validation, seeking approval. We've learned to ask, am I pretty enough for him? Interesting enough, good enough? And we've shaped ourselves, our personalities, our bodies, to get a yes as an answer. But the path we've opened today is a revolution. It's the moment to turn your head 180 degrees, and finally look inward. It's to stop asking whether you're good enough for him and start asking, is the life I'm living good enough for me? Imagine your life is a campfire. For a long time, we've been told to go through life with a small, flickering flame and desperately look for someone to bring us wood so our fire doesn't go out. It was a laborious, dependent search. The approach we saw today is radically different. It's about stopping the search. It's about sitting down, alone if necessary, and focusing all your energy, all your attention on lighting your own fire. Gathering your own wood, your passions, your knowledge, your skills, your friendships, and building it layer by layer until your fire is so big, so hot, and so bright that it's visible from miles away. People are not drawn to a small flicker struggling to survive. People are irresistibly drawn to the warm, powerful glow of a blazing fire. Being admirable is not a show for a date, it's the natural consequence of respecting yourself. When you value your time, your opinion, your passion, and your body, you send a silent but strong message. This is how you will be treated. And here comes the true beauty of this philosophy, and the reason why it is infallible. Think carefully about it. When you start living like this, there are only two possible scenarios. Scenario 1, a great man, a man of true value, sees your fire from afar. He feels drawn to it. He doesn't come to control it, but brings his own wood, sits with you, and enjoys the warmth. Together you make the fire even bigger. This is a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine admiration, the ideal scenario. Scenario 2, you build your fire. A month passes, 6 months, a year, and you're alone. Is that a failure? Quite the opposite. You are a woman who knows more, has experienced more, is stronger, happier, and more interesting than a year ago. You are so deeply in love with your own life, with your own fire, that the arrival of a man is a beautiful bonus, but never again a desperate necessity. Because the deepest form of attraction, the one that creates legends, has nothing to do with turning yourself into the woman he wants. It's about being so complete, so raw, and so radiantly alive in your own skin that it's an absolute privilege for him to stand by your side and warm himself by your fire. So there is the fire, and there is the decision. A decision you must make not only today, but every day, every morning when you wake up, every time you meet someone new, every time a conversation gets deeper. Before you lie, two paths. Path 1 is the old, wide, well-trodden one. The path of adapting. The path where you smooth your edges so as not to offend. The path where you laugh at jokes that don't amuse you. The path where you nod even though inside you're screaming no. The path of turning yourself into a watered-down, pleasing version of yourself, hoping that someone will choose you. It's the path of seeking validation. And then there is the second path, the one we explored today. Narrower, steeper, sometimes lonelier. The path where you build yourself, stone by stone. The decision to read this book instead of watching the trendy series. To start that finance course, even if your friends don't understand. To voice an opinion, even if your voice shakes. It's the path of embracing your uniqueness, of falling in love with your own mind, of becoming a woman who doesn't wait to be chosen, but chooses for herself with whom she shares her time and energy. It's the path of self-respect. In the end, it all comes down to one question, not one you ask him, but yourself. If a man who was once in your life thinks of you years later in silence, what should he remember? A pretty face? A nice body? A nice girl who agreed to everything? Those are memories to throw away, like steam on a mirror. Interchangeable, forgettable. Or do you want his heart to race when he remembers your burning eyes as you spoke about justice? For him to smile at the memory of your loud, honest laugh? For him to feel transported back to a moment when he sensed you had your own gravitational center, an inner world so fascinating that it was a gift to be allowed even a glimpse inside, if only for a moment. That's why my call to you is this. Next time you're getting ready and looking in the mirror, forget the question, how can I look more attractive? Instead, ask yourself a far more powerful one. How can I be a little more myself today? Don't try to be the most beautiful in the room. That's a never-ending competition that drains you. Be the most interesting, because beauty captures the eye, but admiration captures the mind. Today we learned the key to attraction is admiration. But once you've won his mind, how do you translate that connection into body language without breaking the magic? A kiss is not just a kiss. It is the seal of an inner pact. I'm about to show you how to give the kiss that makes him tremble. Not a technique, but a single, silent expression of everything we've understood today. And if this journey into male psychology has touched you, and you don't want to miss a single piece of the puzzle, then subscribe and turn on the bell. There is something about certain women that touches a man's heart without her saying a single word. She doesn't need to shout, demand, or chase. Sometimes she simply remains silent, and yet he feels her more than anyone else, as if an invisible energy accompanies her. A presence that speaks without making a sound. Carl Jung believed that this type of woman has access to something deeper, a psychic influence that stems not from outward appearances or behavior, but from a place many have forgotten, the center of her own soul. This woman doesn't enter a room to prove anything. She arrives and is simply perceived, not because of her clothes or her words, but because of a calmness that fills her, a quiet allure that doesn't announce itself but gently imposes itself. It's as if the temperature of the room changes around her. Her silence is not uncomfortable. It is a silence that soothes, purifies, and gives space to breathe. Even those who have never encountered this presence before feel something, even if they cannot explain it. Maybe you've experienced this. A man who seemed distant, rational, cold, suddenly starts seeking you out even though you haven't said a word. He becomes restless, confused, almost obsessed. You wonder, but I didn't do anything. And that's precisely where the secret lies. There is a power that needs no noise, a vibration that does not beg for love, but acts like an ancient call. Jung called it the symbolic effect of presence. It's not about what you do, but who you are when you're at peace with yourself. This woman, who drives him crazy, even in silence, tries nothing. She follows no tips, no rules, no strategies. She's simply there. In a way that few can be, she wants to convince no one, prove nothing, and that's precisely why she becomes unforgettable. The male unconscious is not only drawn to gestures or words, but to what escapes its control, to mystery, to the unexplained absence, to the calm she radiates, to a gaze that reaches deeper than the surface. Her gaze does not judge, nor does it seek approval. It doesn't invade, it penetrates. This confuses because many men are used to women who explain themselves, adapt, and fear being misunderstood. When they encounter a woman who simply is, without fear of misunderstanding, something within them stirs. It's as if their ego disappears for a moment. In that small space of silence, the unconscious begins to speak. But how did this woman reach that point? How did she learn to stop fighting for love and start being felt? The silence that attracts is not emptiness, but restrained intensity. A soul that doesn't need to explain itself because it has already accepted itself. A woman who has heard "you're too much" many times and realized that this too much was only the other's fear of her fullness. Instead of shrinking, she bloomed. Instead of being quiet to fit in, she remained silent, to expand. That's where the shift begins, for she realizes that true power doesn't lie in being seen, but in being felt, not in being acknowledged through words, but in being remembered without reason. The woman who touches a man even in silence is the one who has learned to live in her own stillness, who has conquered storms within without running from herself. She looked in the mirror and stayed to rebuild, stayed to be reborn. That's why her presence carries a sweet weight, the weight of an entire soul. When a woman stops molding herself to please and starts living her deepest truth, the way she's perceived changes. Even if she doesn't speak, even if she seems distant, her emotional field becomes magnetic. The man begins to miss something he never really had, her most authentic version. Maybe she was by his side for months or years, but only in her silence does he realize, I never really knew her. That is the beginning of an awakening in his unconscious. He doesn't understand it with his mind. He feels it in his body. The lost, the unseen, that which he never appreciated. This energy cannot be faked. It's the result of an inner return, of slow, deep healing, of someone who has stopped shrinking to fit into spaces never meant for her. It's the moment she gives her silence the value that once belonged to others' approval. And this silence becomes presence, not just any presence, but one that is felt even from afar, that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. You might now ask, how can I reach that point? How do I become that woman who leaves traces even in silence? The answer lies less in doing and more in being. It is a path of reconnection with yourself. Nothing you can fake or copy. It's a state you awaken. The woman who remains felt in silence is the one who has learned to trust what's within her. She no longer fights to be heard, for she knows her vibration speaks before any word. She knows true love is not begged for, it is felt. That respect is not forced, it is reflected. This authentic presence becomes an invisible beacon for those who can see deeper. That's why she is in no rush, forces no connections, seeks no quick answers. She trusts life, time, the energy she emits. And it is this quiet trust that makes him uneasy, because the man who once thrived in the game now faces a woman who doesn't play, doesn't compete, who is simply whole. And that disarms him, for he senses that the weapons he once used, rehearsed seduction, fickle attention, empty promises, no longer work. None of it works, for she doesn't live from the desire to be chosen. She has chosen herself. And when a woman truly chooses herself, everything around her changes. She becomes a safe place, but not for everyone, only for those ready to meet her at the same depth. The woman who remains, felt even in silence, carries a truth within her that few can hold. She has learned to listen to herself, and that changes everything. For while many are swept by the noise of the outer world, by messages, social media, and quick responses, she has allowed herself to slow down. She has connected with the tenderest parts of her inner being, those that no one sees, that fit no selfie or cliché. She made a choice. Instead of shouting to be seen, she whispers to herself. And in this silent process, she found a voice no longer dependent on others. A voice that isn't lost when someone leaves, that doesn't tremble when someone stays silent, because now she is her own companion. This emotional self-sufficiency changes everything around her. The man feels it. He senses that he's not facing a woman who needs him to exist, but a woman who could choose him even if she doesn't need him. And that's what disarms him, breaks the game, turns the key. Carl Jung said that true influence doesn't come from effort, but from integrity. This woman is in harmony with her feelings. She doesn't hide what she feels, but she also doesn't dramatize to be seen. She has learned to breathe deeply and understand that there's no need to rush to justify herself, that love doesn't need haste, and that the one who truly wants to know her must dive deep, for she no longer lives on the surface. She doesn't give herself away with the first pretty gesture, doesn't fall for sweet words, because she's lived long enough to know that souls recognize each other in silence, not in performance. The woman who drives him crazy without saying a word is the one who has looked her own pain in the face, who is not afraid of being alone, who does not beg for attention, because she has found something more valuable within herself than any fleeting romance: peace. And this peace, when it is real, is felt even by those who have never experienced it. A man, no matter how rational, distant, or confused he may be, senses it. He cannot name it, yet something stirs within him, as if a voice inside says, "With her, I don't have to pretend, but I also can't lie to her." That is the silent power of the conscious woman. She makes no noise, yet no one forgets her presence, and when she leaves, she takes something irreplaceable with her, the access to the place of peace she gave him. And no matter how hard he tries to replace it, distract himself, or avoid it, he will always remember, not what she said, but how he felt beside her. Because that is what matters, what remains when everything else falls silent. If you are hearing this now, you may be in a phase of silence yourself. Maybe you've stopped writing, stopped insisting, stopped chasing, and wonder if he notices, if he feels it. And I tell you with full honesty, he does feel it. Maybe he won't admit it, maybe he tries to ignore it, but he feels it. Because the silence of a woman who is again connected to her worth is not an ordinary void. It is a mirror that shows him what he has lost, what he did not appreciate, what he may never find again. And yet this woman does not wait for regret. She does not live for the return. She moves on, maybe with pain, sometimes with longing, but with her head held high and a calm heart. Because her self-love has become greater than any unsatisfying answer. This decision to no longer beg is what makes her so extraordinary. It is not pride that silences her, but awareness. It is not coldness that makes her withdraw, but affection. She has decided not to hurt herself anymore by trying to reach those who lack the depth to receive her. And so she leaves traces, even in silence, traces of presence, of truth, of a femininity that cannot be bought. Do you understand? This woman does not want to appear irresistible. She simply respects her own time. And this self-respect is what creates the magnetism. What many call mysterious energy is nothing more than a woman who loves herself enough not to appear where she is not welcome. And when this woman loves, she does not love carelessly. She gives her whole heart. But if there is no reciprocity, she withdraws her energy with the same dignity with which she gave it, without drama, without revenge, simply with serenity. And the man feels it. He feels it when she pulls back. He feels it when she disappears. He feels it when she no longer waits. Because her silence is not vengeful, it is sacred. And when the sacred leaves, it leaves a void. Not just any void, but one that echoes, that unsettles, that is never filled even among other voices. If you've read this far, a part of you is alive, awakened, on its way home. And I want to ask you from the heart, share in the comments a word that describes this moment for you. Maybe return, awakening, peace, or whatever you wish. And if you felt that this video touched you deeply, subscribe to the channel, not as an automatic reaction, but as a ritual of connection. Every word here is written with intention, and if you felt it, you belong here. This space is a hug, a place to remind you that you are not alone. that there is an invisible network of women who are awakening, feeling, and living the same process. Together we are changing more than just relationships with Dandi. We are changing the world. Thank you for being here, truly. The woman who has learned to be silent at the right moment is not hiding, she is protecting herself. There is a big difference between silence born of fear and silence born of maturity. And when this silence is born of maturity, it becomes healing, it becomes a force. Because instead of reacting to what hurts her, she retreats to reflect on what she still feels. It is not coldness, but emotional awareness. And this awareness changes everything. Carl Jung said every change begins with discomfort, an inner restlessness that quietly whispers, "You no longer belong here." That is exactly what many women feel before they begin to change, before they fall silent, before they stop chasing, before they retreat into silence. And it is not pride, not a tactic. It is the body telling them that it's time to go inward. And when she follows this call, something realigns. In that silence, she begins to hear what she previously ignored. The small daily acts of self-betrayal, the yeses that really meant no, the hugs she gave without ever receiving one back, the plans she made alone, the promises she accepted out of fear of loss. All this appears in the mirror of her awareness. And it is not easy, but it is liberating, because by clearly seeing where she abandoned herself, she begins to reconnect. That is where her presence arises, a presence that needs no explanation, that does not need to please, that simply exists fully and firmly and thus leaves traces. The woman who embodies this presence does not need to speak what she feels, because her energy speaks for her. She does not need to justify her absence, because the echo of what was is enough to be felt. She does not need to ask to be remembered, because her absence speaks loudly enough to never be forgotten. Men notice it, even those who seem the most rational, even those who claim it means nothing to them. Their subconscious perceives when a woman changes, when she falls silent out of self-love, when she stops justifying herself, when she no longer reacts to old patterns, and in that moment something breaks in them because they lose the power they thought they had, and they don't know how to deal with it. Many will try to return, but not out of real remorse, rather because her silence unsettles them, the feeling of having lost something valuable without knowing exactly what. And here lies the difficulty. The woman who has been silent out of self-love must be careful not to fall into the trap of recycled affection. Her silence must not become a trap. It must remain sacred. And that is the greatest challenge, to remain steadfast even in the face of empty apologies, repeated promises, and a longing that brings no change. She now has a new task, to be the guardian of her own peace, to protect what she has rebuilt within, not like a wall, but like a garden, a place that welcomes those who come with truth, but that no longer opens its gates to those who come only out of habit. This changes her way of loving. She now loves without losing herself, without erasing herself, without begging. The woman who drives him crazy, even in silence, is the one who no longer seeks her worth in the actions of others. She has already recognized it, integrated it, and shares it only when she wants to. If not, that's okay too, because she has understood that there's no rush to be chosen. When she chose herself, everything else lost its urgency. She no longer runs against time. She walks with it. This way of living is revolutionary because it contradicts everything she was taught. They told her women must constantly give themselves, always be understanding, sacrifice for love. But she broke that cycle. Now she chooses a love that includes her, respects her, listens to her, even in silence. And the most beautiful thing is, by doing so, she inspires not only men, but also the world around her. Other women begin to realize that it's possible to be strong without becoming hard, kind without submitting, to love without abandoning oneself. Jung believed that true feminine power is healing, that when a woman reconnects with her soul, she begins to heal everyone around her, not through effort, but through presence. And that's exactly what this woman does. She enters a room in silence, and the atmosphere changes. Not through magic, but because her energy cleanses, her truth realigns, her calm breaks the chaos. She becomes a living example of what it means to be awake. And even if few understand it, she no longer needs external validation. She no longer lives for appearances, but for something greater: self-respect, self-love, integrity in her emotions. And this kind of woman leaves traces, rare, subtle, but eternal. What few realize is that the woman who has learned to be silent has also learned to love differently, a purer, fuller, truer love, because she loves not out of need or fear of loneliness, but out of choice, presence, and freedom. This unusual, vibrant form of love frightens those who have never experienced anything like it. She no longer lets herself be driven by impulses. She observes, feels, listens to herself first. And if something in her body says no, she respects it. Even if her mind says yes, even if the other insists, even if the moment seems tempting. Because she knows any connection that separates her from herself is not worth it. She no longer negotiates her peace. This woman lives at a different rhythm. While the world demands urgency, she cultivates time. While others try to prove their worth, she simply allows herself to be. And this simple, authentic being makes her so extraordinary, because it's easy to find people who want to be loved, but rare to find someone so connected to their own essence that they no longer have to ask for it. When this woman appears, even in silence, she becomes a mirror for the lack of depth in others, a mirror for their emotional urgency, a mirror for what they lack and what she unintentionally reveals through her presence. Her silence is not emptiness, it is an answer that says, I am no longer available for what does not see me. And this answer, even if never spoken, is felt, because the body speaks, the soul calls, and those who are sensitive will hear it. Many men will interpret this silence as disinterest, others as pride. But those who are truly ready to grow emotionally will recognize that this silence is an opportunity, a unique chance to meet someone who has already freed herself from empty urgencies and now only seeks the truth. A woman who is silent out of self-love wants no games, no fantasies, no applause. She wants connection. It's that simple. Someone who won't run when things get deep. Someone who doesn't hide when she opens her soul. This woman is tired of loves that make her doubt herself. Now she seeks connections that make her bloom, and that changes everything. Because when she realizes that she can be happy without depending on others' approval, she begins to truly live. And when a woman truly lives, she becomes a seed of change wherever she goes. She doesn't need to raise her voice. Her energy speaks for itself. The silence of this woman is a portal, a space others can dive into if they dare. But few do, because in that space there are no masks. Everything is seen, felt, exposed, and not everyone is ready for that emotional nakedness. Yet those who are never forget what they found there, because this silence is not absence, but concentrated presence. She carries an entire universe within, stories, scars, laughter, falls, new beginnings. All of it vibrates in her energy, especially when she is silent. Because in silence the soul dances, the gaze reveals, the skin speaks, the vibration expands. If a man is sensitive enough to feel it, he understands it, even if he can't explain it. What changed this woman the most is that she stopped convincing. Now she invites others to approach with truth, stay with intention, linger with presence. And if that doesn't happen, she doesn't beg, she creates space for herself, for the new, for what resonates on the same frequency. And that's where the man feels the difference. He is used to women who demand, who ask, who push. But this woman doesn't demand. She invites and still tolerates, no compromise. Not out of coldness, but out of love. Love for her own heart, her own silence, her own path. Those who love like this leave marks that time cannot erase. When she distances herself, it's not to punish, but to preserve. And if you can still feel her from afar, it's because her presence has taken root, deep roots, planted not in gestures or words, but in something greater, in the silent energy of a person who is whole, even without guarantees. The silence of this woman is now her greatest kingdom. There she hears herself. There she understands what really matters. Above all, she has stopped fixing what was never hers. She no longer needs to convince anyone. She knows what she carries within. And this certainty is so rare that it often unsettles. Because we live in a world where women are constantly told to prove that they are enough, sweet enough, strong enough, smart enough, beautiful enough, lovable enough, interesting enough. But this woman no longer plays that game. She knows the more she tries to prove, the more she loses herself. Now she moves lightly, does not compete, she simply is. And that is what he cannot forget. Because she did not display herself, did not beg, did not explain, did not plead for space. She simply existed. This full, silent, and steady existence becomes an echo, an emotional resonance, a memory, an impression that remains even when everything seems over. Carl Jung said the unconscious manifests in our lives as fate. And when a woman awakens, she stops being someone else's destiny and begins to choose her own. She no longer follows repeated patterns, no longer accepts half-loves. She recognizes when others are not ready and no longer tries to force anyone to awaken. She no longer wants to save or be saved. She walks with those who also walk, no longer goes ahead, and no longer carries others on her shoulders. She no longer asks anyone to come, because she is complete alone. And this emotional independence is powerful. Not in the sense of dominance, but in the sense of presence. She becomes a woman who says everything without words, who changes her surroundings without noise, who attracts without trying to seduce, because her vibration speaks for itself. Those in alignment come closer. Those who are not leave on their own, without pain, without struggle, just with the awareness that not everything has to continue. Not every story must become a future. Some only exist to teach you to love yourself better. This woman does not deny her feelings. She allows herself to feel, to cry, to miss, but she no longer drowns, no longer loses herself to save others. She looks pain in the eye and asks, "What have you come to show me?" And there, between the tears, she finds herself again, with her strength, her light, her depth. She always returns, but differently, more complete, stronger, more herself. And that is exactly why he does not forget her, because what she gave him, he found nowhere else. Maybe he searched in other faces, bodies, voices, but something was always missing. It wasn't her body, it was her soul. The space she created, the safety she radiated, the gaze that said, even in silence, "I see you." And when a woman sees a man like that, he never feels seen in the same way again. Even if he can't explain it, even if he runs, even if he denies it, his subconscious keeps it like a code only she has deciphered. But this woman doesn't hold on. She knows it's not about being unforgettable, but authentic. If she is remembered, fine. If not, that's fine too. She doesn't live for others' gaze, but to stay true to her own essence. The freedom she has achieved comes at a price. Not everyone can stand the light she carries. Not everyone stays, but she no longer trades her light for company. She has learned to be alone, and no longer feels lonely. For a man who always had control over his attachments, this is unsettling, because he realizes he cannot manipulate what doesn't depend on him, and he sees that what he lost can't be bought anywhere. This woman, who once gave in, now chooses. Who once begged, now observes. Who once tolerated, now is silent. And this silence is not indifference, but it is self-care. peace, self-love in its purest form. There is no shouting, no teaching, only feeling. Whoever wants to feels it, whoever doesn't moves on. That's how she lives, with grounded feet, a free heart, and an open soul. Not for everyone, but for the truth. And when someone approaches her like that, she knows, because now she trusts her intuition more than ever. This trust is the foundation of everything, because she no longer doubts what she feels. And that alone is liberation. The woman who drives him crazy, even in silence, has no formulas. She has truths. And that's why, even as time passes, life goes on, other names come. She remains. Not out of attachment, but because her energy doesn't fade. Her memory is strong. Her love, when she gives it, carries something ancient, and the male subconscious knows it, feels it, keeps it. She didn't want to be remembered, she simply was. And no one can take that away from her. If this silence is also yours, if you carry stories that were never told, if you have ever loved in silence or walked away without a cry, then this is your place. Here, every word is written with soul, and every silence is honored with love. Because when a woman is consciously silent, she changes everything around her. And when she finds herself, she never again accepts being only half. We are connected from soul to soul. Have you ever noticed that there are women who seem untouched by time, as if they carry a special glow that surpasses their actual age? This is about more than just genetics. Something deeper is at work in the hidden realms, beyond what we usually call aging. It is not about skincare or surgery. We are talking about a phenomenon that Carl Jung would have immediately recognized, namely, that the state of the soul shapes the expression of the body. What you are about to discover challenges much of what you have thought so far about the connection between inner vitality and outer appearance. The secret does not lie in what these women do, but in what they carry in their energy field, a rare spiritual alignment that acts like a shield against the destructive force of time. At the end of this journey, you will understand why some souls shine while others fade, and how this ancient knowledge can also change your relationship with aging. The mystery does not begin in front of the mirror, but with the light that comes from within. When Jung spoke about the influence of the psyche on physical appearance, he knew consciousness shapes reality in a way we have almost forgotten today. Some women carry a vibration within them that works outside the usual laws of aging. Imagine a woman walking through a crowded room. She does not attract attention by effort or artificial means, but by an indescribable radiance that seems to bend the light around her. Her face tells stories, yet still looks fresh. Her eyes reveal ancient knowledge and yet sparkle with childlike curiosity. This is the archetype of radiant femininity, the woman whose soul keeps her young. Jung described this phenomenon with the process of individuation, the union of conscious and unconscious, leading to psychic wholeness. Women who walk this path often notice that their outer appearance changes along with their inner transformation. They embody what Jung called the eternal aspect of the feminine, the timeless essence that transcends biological aging. Within them lives what Jung called the anima mundi, the world soul that invisibly connects all living things. They have learned to attune themselves to this cosmic rhythm. Their personal life story thus submits to something greater, timeless. This confirms what mystics have always known. Consciousness shapes time, and time shapes the body that carries this consciousness. These women share a common ability. They transform suffering into wisdom without becoming bitter. While others become heavy with disappointments, they turn pain into radiance. Think of the woman who has endured many losses and yet carries an inexplicable gentleness on her face. She has not bypassed life but practiced what Jung called active imagination, the ability to work with unconscious contents creatively and healingly. In this way, she prevents inner poisons, which would otherwise lead to premature aging, from taking root in her system. The ancient Greeks distinguished between chronos and kairos. Chronos is linear, mechanical time to which most submit. Kairos, on the other hand, is sacred time, the eternal moment in which transformation becomes possible. Women who mysteriously appear young live primarily in kairos. Chronos touches them only when necessary, but it never defines their essence. The beginning of this path lies in what Jung called the encounter with the shadow, the parts within us we would rather hide. Many people waste immense energy suppressing these dark sides. This eventually shows on the face, posture, and aura. The radiant woman has made peace with her shadow. She has integrated it instead of fighting it. From this integration arises what ancient alchemists called the philosopher's stone, a state of inner wholeness that radiates outward. When inner conflicts stop constantly draining life energy, this power is freed for regeneration and renewal. The face relaxes into its natural beauty. The eyes become clear, free from the fog of inner struggles. The posture straightens with genuine, not feigned, self-confidence. Yet something deeper happens here, something directly connected with the nature of time itself. Jung understood that the psyche works according to its own laws of time. He called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidences pointing to a reality beyond linear causality. Women who embody this rare spiritual quality seem to live partly outside normal time. They have developed what Jung called the observing ego, a part of consciousness that can distance itself from the drama of everyday life and yet remain fully engaged. This inner attitude allows them to observe their own aging process without identifying with it. A paradoxical shield arises precisely because they consciously perceive aging, it slows down. They age as participants, not as victims. Connected with this is what Jung called the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious that makes genuine transformation possible. This psychological achievement creates a kind of time bubble around them in which the usual laws of aging operate differently. Yes, they age, but in the rhythm of their soul's development, not according to the merciless ticking of the clock. Perhaps you have already met women with an ageless radiance that makes you question their true age. They move with a dignity that testifies to inner work. Their soul wounds have been transformed into strength rather than exhaustion. Their laughter arises from deep layers. Their silence carries peace. Their presence awakens wonder about hidden mysteries. Science is now beginning to catch up with what Jung sensed decades ago. Research in epigenetics shows emotions directly influence how genes express themselves. Chronic stress accelerates the aging of cells. States of inner peace and joy, on the other hand, promote regeneration. Even telomeres, those protective caps of our chromosomes, biological markers of aging, respond sensitively to our psychological state. What Jung called the collective unconscious gives these women access to an inexhaustible source of renewal. They tap into archetypal energies that have carried the feminine for millennia. This connection creates something like biological grace. Cell regeneration happens faster, the body stays young. Women who maintain vital contact with the self, the archetype of wholeness and meaning, show measurable differences. Their cortisol remains balanced, inflammation levels are stable, cell repair mechanisms run optimally. The peace of the soul preserves the youth of the body. This is not fantasy, but the recognition of a deep connection between consciousness and physicality that Jung explored throughout his life. He recognized that psyche and body are not separate domains but two sides of a whole, and that change in one always affects the other. Jung also spoke of the religious function of the psyche. By this, he did not mean institutional religion, but the sense of the sacred that can permeate everyday life. Women who live this feeling treat their bodies like temples of consciousness. This reverence protects them even on a level we would today call quantum-like. The luminous woman has also learned what Jung called the art of letting die, letting go of what no longer serves without clinging to familiar patterns. She knows that every stage of life demands an inner death and a rebirth, and she goes through these transitions with dignity rather than resistance. While others grow heavy under emotional burdens, she practices conscious release. She keeps only what allows her soul to grow. Everything else remains behind before it engraves itself in lines and shadows on her face. This letting go also concerns the expectations of others and societal role models. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear in everyday life. Those who identify too strongly with it get caught in rigid patterns. The luminous woman wears her masks lightly, like clothes that one adapts to the season. In her psyche works what Jung called the autonomous complex of the eternal feminine, an inner structure that operates independently of conscious will but always serves the highest growth. This inner principle protects her from becoming rigid when women lose their cyclical, regenerative nature and orient themselves only toward linear time. Through the transcendent function, she has found a third way, beyond the opposites of youth and age, beauty and decay, meaning and meaninglessness. In her presence, one feels, this woman is a friend of time, not in battle with it. She dances with it instead of fighting it. Thus arises a field that lets others feel how the weight of time briefly becomes lighter. Jung would have recognized in this the archetype of the wise woman, not as an old witch figure, but as a living embodiment of timeless wisdom. These women have deepened their access to the collective unconscious, to the eternal feminine, which is always renewing itself. The unconscious continuously balances out the rigid ego through dreams, insights, intuitions. In this way, they remain in harmony with their true path of development and escape the spiritual stagnation that otherwise accelerates aging. The rare spiritual quality of these women is ultimately the harmonious integration of many of Jung's ideas. They have achieved what Jung called the union of opposites, the balance of masculine and feminine energies within themselves, the integration of light and shadow, the acceptance of both strength and vulnerability. This inner marriage works like a psychological alchemy that transforms everything it touches. Their faces become living mandalas, symbols of inner wholeness, which Jung understood as the natural expression of the self. The symmetry of their features does not testify to genetic luck, but to a balance achieved through conscious inner work. The light in their eyes reflects the integration of all parts of the personality into a harmonious whole. This quality shows most clearly in their relationship to suffering. Where others develop permanent furrows of bitterness from pain, these women have cultivated what Jung called a religious attitude towards psychic material. They know every wound carries within it the seed of healing. Every crisis contains the potential for greater awareness. The luminous woman has achieved what Jung called differentiated feeling, the ability to distinguish between emotions that serve growth and those that only continue old patterns of suffering. She can feel deeply without losing herself. She can grieve fully without going under. She can be truly angry without overloading her system with poison. This emotional maturity protects her from the inflammatory response in the body that research directly links to accelerated aging. This does not mean she avoids suffering or pretends it does not exist. Rather, she has developed the ability to endure what Jung called the tension of opposites, to remain present with difficult experiences without immediately fleeing or rushing to quick solutions. In this way, she prevents the inner fragmentation that accelerates the aging process. Her nervous system remains regulated even under pressure and preserves what researchers today call heart rate coherence, a state in which breathing, heart rhythm, and emotions are in harmony. This coherence has a profound effect on hormones, the immune system, and cell renewal. The peace of the soul becomes the medicine of the body. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about these women is their relationship to the future. While others cling to youth or fear time, they have developed what Jung called prospective thinking, the ability to recognize the potential of each moment for growth. They live in becoming, not in nostalgia. This awareness creates a field of possibilities. They attract experiences and relationships that foster their development. As if their clear intention to grow calls the fitting circumstances into life, Jung would have called this synchronicity in action. Their faces mirror this openness to the future. Instead of rigid features that tell of resignation, they carry flowing features, faces that allow infinite expressiveness, eyes full of curiosity about what life has yet to reveal. Jung's idea of the unus mundus, the unity of all reality, is reflected in their cells. They have achieved what alchemists called the union of microcosm and macrocosm, a personal transformation so fully aligned with cosmic principles that their own aging process unfolds in harmony with the eternal cycles of nature. The spiritual quality they embody ultimately concerns not only the relationship to themselves, but also to the invisible forces Jung called archetypes. They have learned to work consciously with these universal patterns of human experience. From this, they draw strength and renewal. In their presence, one feels this archetypal connection. They seem to carry more within them than their individual life could explain, as if they had access to the wisdom of all the women who walked similar paths before them. This collective feminine grants them a timeless authority that has nothing to do with age. Their laughter carries echoes of the eternal feminine, which Jung recognized as one of the fundamental ordering structures of the psyche. When they speak, you do not hear only their voice, but something greater that speaks through them, an expression of the divine feminine that uses their personality as a vessel. This permeability requires what Jung called a permeable ego, strong enough to maintain identity, and at the same time open to the transpersonal. A balance that takes years of inner work. Once achieved, these women radiate a brightness that goes beyond personal boundaries. So arises what Jung called the conjunctio, the mystical marriage of conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, temporal and eternal. From this inner union grows what alchemists called the child of the wise, a renewed self that carries both the wisdom of experience and the freshness of new beginnings. The face becomes a living testimony of this inner harmony. Women who bear this rare spiritual quality have learned to live what Jung called a symbolic life, an existence in which every experience means more than just the obvious. And it is precisely this attitude that protects them from that existential emptiness that makes so many people old, because meaninglessness consumes their life force. For them, every day, every action becomes a small ritual of renewal. Their relationships serve them as mirrors for further growth. Challenges transform into opportunities for deeper insight. This alchemical attitude towards experiences means nothing is lost. Every moment contributes to their development. This sense of meaning is directly reflected in the vitality of their physical presence. Jung recognized that the psyche possesses a natural healing function, an inherent tendency toward wholeness that works independently of conscious will. In women who carry this rare spiritual quality, this function is consciously activated and nurtured. A process of continuous cellular renewal arises, working from the inside out. Thus, not only their appearance is transformed, but also the way they inhabit their body. As we now come to the conclusion of this exploration, it becomes clear. The fountain of youth is not a mythical place in the distance. It is a psychological state, accessible to anyone willing to walk the inner path of integration and individuation that Jung so precisely described. The women who embody this rare spiritual quality have not discovered a secret recipe or a magical formula. They have learned to live in harmony with the deeper currents of their psyche, to consciously work with archetypal forces that shape human existence, and to maintain a living connection to the transcendent dimension of being. Their apparent youth is in truth an expression of spiritual maturity. Their wholeness shows itself in a physical appearance that shines from within. They have achieved what alchemists called the opus contra naturam, the work against nature, which paradoxically makes true nature visible. In their presence, you sense what humans can become when they learn to consciously engage with the forces Jung explored. They stand not only for personal achievement, but for collective possibility, that the development of consciousness can indeed be reflected in the body. This rare spiritual quality is, in essence, accessible to all. It only requires the courage to embark on the inner journey Jung called individuation. The willingness to meet one's own shadow and integrate one's own light. The decision to live consciously rather than automatically. The soul that walks this path discovers its timeless essence. And this discovery changes everything, including the way we age. If you have recognized yourself in this exploration or feel inspired to begin your own path of conscious aging, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. Share in the comments what has touched you most deeply and which aspects of this rare spiritual quality you would like to unfold in your life. Your thoughts enrich our shared understanding of how consciousness shapes reality and how the state of the soul influences the expression of the body. Together we rediscover what Jung brought to light, that true youth springs from the eternal source of the integrated self.
Jung's most dangerous discovery wasn't about empathy alone. It was about why empaths leave without warning and never return, and what this sudden vanishing reveals about the hidden psychological mechanisms that most people never understand. In his research on psychological types, Jung documented what I call empathic departure syndrome, a pattern where highly sensitive individuals with dominant introverted intuition would endure toxic relationships for months or years, showing infinite patience and accommodation, then disappear completely without explanation or possibility of return. Jung called this phenomenon dangerous because these empaths possessed what he described as unconscious boundary systems that operated below conscious awareness. Their introverted intuition would detect relationship toxicity and emotional manipulation long before their conscious mind could process it, creating what Jung termed a silent psychological emergency that built pressure until sudden departure became inevitable. What made this discovery so disturbing to Jung was the finality. These weren't temporary withdrawals or dramatic exits designed to get attention. These empaths would vanish into complete silence and never return, leaving behind bewildered partners, friends, and family members who genuinely believed everything was fine. Today I'll reveal Jung's insights about why empaths leave without warning and never return, and why he believed this wasn't cruelty or abandonment, but what I call unconscious self-rescue, the psyche's emergency intervention when conscious boundaries have completely failed. Jung's breakthrough came through observing a patient he described as having extraordinary sensitivity to others' emotional states. This individual would absorb criticism, manipulation, and emotional demands for months, while their dreams showed increasingly desperate warning signs: drowning in muddy water, being trapped in burning buildings, carrying impossibly heavy stones. Then something unprecedented happened. Without any apparent trigger, no argument, no dramatic confrontation, the patient simply vanished from a long-term relationship. Complete silence, no explanation, no gradual withdrawal. Jung was baffled. This contradicted everything he knew about human behavior patterns. When he investigated further, Jung discovered the patient's unconscious had been tracking relationship toxicity through introverted intuition for 6 months before departure. Their nervous system had been registering emotional abuse while their conscious mind rationalized it away. The sudden disappearance wasn't impulsive. It was what Jung called psychic emergency surgery. Jung wrote, "The unconscious intervened when consciousness failed to protect the individual from psychological annihilation." This case revealed that some people possess internal warning systems so sophisticated they can predict relationship failure months in advance, yet their conscious mind remains unable to act until the unconscious takes control completely. This wasn't an isolated incident. Jung began documenting similar patterns across multiple patients, leading to his theory of what I call empathic overwhelm, a condition where sensitivity becomes a liability without proper psychological boundaries. Jung discovered that highly sensitive individuals possess what I call intuitive toxicity detection. Their dominant introverted intuition function continuously scans relationships for emotional inconsistencies, manipulation tactics, and psychological red flags operating far below conscious awareness. Here's what Jung found. These individuals unconsciously process thousands of microsignals, tone changes, facial expressions, energy shifts, behavioral inconsistencies, that their conscious mind dismisses as paranoia. Their knee function creates detailed psychological maps of relationship dynamics, while their feeling function compels them to ignore these insights. Jung documented 3 phases of this unconscious warning system. Phase 1. Silent alarm. The intuitive function begins detecting manipulation or emotional abuse, but the conscious mind rationalizes it away. Dreams become increasingly chaotic and urgent. Phase 2. Psychological pressure. The unconscious builds what Jung called departure energy, a compulsive need to escape that grows stronger while the conscious mind maintains accommodation patterns. Phase 3. Emergency override. The unconscious mind activates what Jung termed survival protocols, forcing sudden departure to prevent complete psychological collapse. Jung realized this system explained why these departures seem so sudden to others. The empath's conscious behavior remained accommodating right up until the moment of departure, masking months of unconscious distress. Jung identified a psychological trap that makes departure without warning almost inevitable for many empaths. When their intuition detects relationship toxicity, instead of acting on this information, they unconsciously increase their accommodation behavior. Jung called this inverse boundary response. The more threatened they feel unconsciously, the more giving they become consciously. This creates what Jung observed as false relationship security, where toxic behavior escalates because the empath's increased accommodation signals infinite tolerance. The devastating result: others genuinely believe everything is perfect, while the empath's psychological foundation crumbles invisibly. Jung documented cases where people were completely shocked by departures because the empath had been more attentive and giving than ever in the weeks before disappearing. Jung identified the cruel irony. Their compassion became their prison. Their empathy enabled the very behavior that ultimately destroyed the relationship. The more they tried to heal others through accommodation, the more permission they gave for toxic behavior to continue. This pattern explains why explanations are often impossible after departure. How do you explain months of invisible psychological damage to someone who never saw it happening? Jung noted that attempts to explain often led to gaslighting or manipulation, making silence the only protective option. Jung categorized 4 distinct ways empaths vanish, each representing different levels of psychological awareness. The phantom vanish, complete disappearance without any warning signs visible to others. These empaths have mastered unconscious accommodation so thoroughly that their distress remains completely hidden. They simply stop responding to all communication permanently. Jung observed this in individuals whose feeling function completely suppressed their intuitive warnings until unconscious intervention became necessary. The gradual fade. These empaths begin showing subtle signs of withdrawal, shorter conversations, delayed responses, less emotional availability, but never explain why. They slowly reduce contact until communication stops entirely. Jung noted this pattern in those whose unconscious was gradually overriding their conscious accommodation drive. The boundary explosion, a sudden shift from endless patience to rigid boundaries, often triggered by one seemingly minor incident that represents months of accumulated violations. They don't leave immediately, but become completely unavailable emotionally. When these boundaries are inevitably tested or violated, permanent departure follows without discussion. The silent protection. These empaths recognize the pattern consciously and leave strategically, often during times when their absence will cause minimal disruption. They may leave notes or messages explaining their general need for space, but provide no specific details that could be used for manipulation. Jung found that all four patterns shared one crucial element: the complete absence of negotiation or explanation post-departure. Unlike normal relationship conflicts, these endings offered no opportunity for discussion or reconciliation. Jung's most startling discovery was why these empaths never return. It's not choice, but psychological impossibility. Once the unconscious mind executes what Jung called protective departure, attempting to return creates what he observed as severe psychological distress. Jung documented that empaths who tried to return experienced panic attacks, depression, and what I call psychic recoil. Their nervous system actively rejected re-engagement with the relationship. Their unconscious had classified the relationship as psychologically lethal and would not permit re-exposure. Jung identified three barriers to return: unconscious protection protocols. The same psychological mechanism that forced departure actively prevents return. Jung observed this as an evolutionary survival mechanism. Once the psyche identifies a threat to psychological survival, it maintains permanent vigilance against re-exposure. Transformation. During absence, Jung found that empaths undergo rapid psychological changes during separation. Their unconscious uses the space to restore depleted emotional resources and develop stronger boundary recognition. Returning would require abandoning this psychological growth. Reality recognition. Away from the relationship, empaths often experience what Jung called clarity restoration. They begin seeing manipulation patterns that were invisible while accommodating. This new awareness makes returning feel like conscious self-harm. Jung concluded that these departures represent what he called psychological molting. The individual must shed their old identity as unlimited accommodator to survive psychologically. Return would mean climbing back into a discarded skin that no longer fits. Jung developed specific techniques to help empaths recognize unconscious warnings before reaching departure crisis points. Intuitive signal recognition. Jung taught empaths to track correlation between their dreams, physical sensations, and relationship dynamics. When anxiety, exhaustion, or chaotic dreams increase around specific people, this indicates unconscious toxicity detection. Instead of dismissing these signals, Jung encouraged documenting patterns to develop conscious awareness of unconscious warnings. Boundary testing protocols. Rather than waiting for crisis, Jung advocated for deliberate boundary experiments. Express one small limit and observe the response. Healthy people respect boundaries. Toxic people violate them. This provides early relationship assessment without requiring major confrontation. Energy tracking systems. Jung instructed empaths to monitor their energy levels before and after interactions. Consistent energy drain from specific relationships indicates psychological toxicity, even when conscious interaction feels positive. This creates objective measurement of relationship health. Communication frameworks. Jung developed scripts for expressing limits without extensive justification. I've noticed I need more space, rather than detailed explanations that invite manipulation. The key insight: boundaries are statements of intention, not requests for permission. Departure decision criteria. Jung established clear indicators for when departure becomes necessary. Repeated boundary violations after clear communication. Escalating manipulation when limits are expressed. Refusal to acknowledge impact of harmful behavior, and attempts to use empathy against the empath. These techniques transform unconscious departure into conscious choice, eliminating the trauma of sudden vanishing while maintaining psychological protection. Jung analyzed historical figures who demonstrated both successful boundary integration and empathic departure patterns. Virginia Woolf. Jung would have recognized Woolf's sensitivity and her struggles with what he called empathic overwhelm. Her letters reveal patterns of absorbing others' emotional states while losing connection to her own needs. Her ultimate departure from life itself represents the extreme end of what happens when sensitive individuals cannot develop protective boundaries. Maya Angelou. Angelou's autobiography reveals multiple instances of sudden departure from toxic relationships and situations. Jung would have identified her famous quote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time," as integrated intuitive wisdom, trusting initial unconscious impressions rather than waiting for conscious proof. Carl Rogers. Despite his therapeutic empathy, Rogers maintained strict professional boundaries. Jung observed that Rogers understood empathy required protection. Unlimited emotional availability destroys both helper and helped. His success came from conscious boundary management rather than unconscious accommodation. Eleanor Roosevelt. Roosevelt's transformation from accommodating wife to independent leader demonstrates successful empathic integration. She learned to channel sensitivity towards social justice rather than personal accommodation, finding outlets for empathy that didn't require self-destruction. The pattern Jung identified: successful empaths learn to trust their intuitive warnings and act on them consciously, while those who remain trapped in accommodation patterns either departed unconsciously or suffered psychological breakdown. Jung recognized that empaths need relationships with people who understand sensitivity as strength rather than liability. Recognition. Signals for safe people. Jung identified specific traits. They respect no without requiring extensive justification. They manage their own emotions rather than expecting others to do it for them. They appreciate empathy without exploiting it, and they demonstrate what Jung called reciprocal consideration, thinking about how their behavior affects others. The mutual empathy principle. Jung observed that healthy relationships for empaths require both people to consider each other's emotional well-being. One-sided emotional labor inevitably leads to accommodation patterns and eventual departure. Community-building strategies. Jung recommended seeking environments where sensitivity is valued, creative communities where emotional intelligence serves artistic expression, therapeutic or helping professions where empathy has clear boundaries and purpose, spiritual communities focused on consciousness development rather than emotional dependency, and what Jung called growth partnerships, where both people commit to honest communication and mutual respect. Avoiding empathic predators. Jung warned about individuals who specifically target empaths, those who share dramatic personal stories quickly to trigger rescue responses, people who consistently violate small boundaries while apologizing profusely, individuals who alternate between excessive appreciation and subtle criticism, and those who react with anger or manipulation when boundaries are expressed. Jung emphasized that empaths must learn to see accommodation addiction as clearly as any other dependency. It serves the ego's need to feel needed while destroying authentic connection. Jung documented that empaths who successfully integrate their sensitivity without losing it follow predictable development stages. Stage 1. Recognition crisis, usually triggered by a particularly painful relationship loss, where they realize accommodation didn't prevent abandonment, but enabled mistreatment. The breakthrough comes when they understand their sensitivity is valuable and deserves protection. Stage 2. Boundary experimentation, learning to set small limits and observe responses. This stage involves considerable guilt and fear of being selfish, but also the liberating discovery that healthy people respect boundaries while toxic people reveal themselves through violations. Stage 3. Intuitive integration, developing trust in unconscious warning signals rather than dismissing them as overthinking. This includes learning to distinguish between anxiety and genuine intuitive warnings about people or situations. Stage 4. Conscious choice, reaching the ability to choose emotional investments wisely rather than giving indiscriminately. They become what Jung called consciously empathic, sensitive by choice rather than compulsion. Stage 5. Empathic mastery. The final integration where sensitivity becomes a gift, shared selectively rather than a wound that attracts predators. They can love deeply while maintaining clear boundaries, creating the extraordinary relationships they always desired. Jung noted that fully integrated empaths rarely need to leave relationships suddenly because they address issues early and only invest in people who demonstrate mutual respect. If you've learned to trust your inner warnings before reaching your breaking point, comment, "I honor the whispers so I don't have to hear the screams." Jung identified specific traps that prevent successful empathic development. The overcorrection trap, swinging from over-accommodation to complete emotional unavailability. Jung observed, this prevents the genuine connections empaths actually need for psychological health. The guilt manipulation spiral. When empaths begin setting boundaries, toxic individuals often escalate manipulation tactics, using the empath's compassion against them. Jung emphasized that how someone responds to boundaries reveals their true character. This is information, not something to fix. The explanation addiction. Believing boundaries require extensive justification or other people's agreement to be valid. Jung noted that over-explaining invites manipulation and debate. Boundaries are personal decisions, not group negotiations. The isolation overreaction, withdrawing from all connection rather than learning to discern between healthy and unhealthy people. Jung warned, this prevents the meaningful relationships empaths need for psychological thriving. Jung's maintenance practices included regular solitude for emotional processing, creative expression for channeling sensitivity, relationships with other emotionally mature individuals, and what I call boundary practice, consistently maintaining small limits to build confidence for larger ones. Jung believed empaths who learn conscious boundaries serve a crucial evolutionary function in human psychological development. When sensitive people demonstrate that deep connection requires mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice, they model healthier relationship dynamics for everyone around them. Jung observed that unconscious empathic departure, while necessary for individual survival, also serves what he called collective teaching function. It forces those left behind to confront their own emotional dependency and parasitic relationship patterns. Jung noted, the empath's sudden absence becomes a mirror, reflecting back the other person's capacity for genuine care versus mere consumption of empathic resources. This teaching function operates through what Jung identified as absence education. People learn about healthy relationship dynamics through loss rather than explanation. When someone who provided endless emotional support suddenly disappears, it reveals the one-sided nature of the relationship in ways that words never could. Jung documented that empathic departures often trigger what he called relationship awakening in those left behind. Some people recognize their exploitative patterns and begin developing genuine empathy and reciprocity. Others reveal their true nature by becoming angry at losing their empathic resource rather than concerned about the departed person's well-being. Cultural empathy modeling. Jung saw integrated empaths as relationship pioneers, demonstrating that true intimacy comes from conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion. He believed that as empaths learn healthy boundary management, they create what he called empathy exemplars, living examples of how sensitivity and strength can coexist. These individuals show others that empathy doesn't require self-destruction, that caring doesn't mean endless accommodation, and that healthy love includes self-protection. Jung observed that when empaths maintain boundaries while remaining warm and caring, they give others permission to do the same. Jung noted that empathic modeling has particular impact on children and young adults who are developing their own relationship patterns. When they observe empaths setting healthy boundaries while maintaining loving connections, they learn that sensitivity and self-respect are compatible rather than contradictory. Collective emotional intelligence development. Jung believed that humanity's emotional evolution depends partly on individuals who can feel deeply while thinking clearly about relationship dynamics. He saw empaths as what I call emotional intelligence pioneers, people who develop sophisticated understanding of psychological patterns and teach others through example. Jung observed that empaths who have integrated their sensitivity often become natural counselors, mediators, or healers, not because they sacrifice themselves for others, but because they understand both emotional depth and psychological protection. Their combination of empathy and boundaries makes them uniquely qualified to help others navigate relationship challenges. He noted that integrated empaths often find their life purpose involves helping others escape toxic relationships or develop emotional intelligence. Their own journey from unconscious accommodation to conscious boundaries becomes a roadmap for others walking similar paths. Social system transformation. Jung recognized that cultural change often begins with individuals who refuse to participate in dysfunctional patterns. When empaths stop enabling toxic behavior through endless accommodation, they force social systems to evolve or reveal their true nature. Jung documented how empathic boundary setting creates what he called authenticity pressure in social groups. When the most accommodating member begins setting limits, others must either develop genuine empathy or find new sources of emotional exploitation. This pressure often leads to healthier group dynamics or reveals which relationships were based on exploitation rather than mutual care. Jung observed that workplaces, families, and communities with integrated empaths often develop higher standards for emotional intelligence and mutual respect. The empath's refusal to tolerate poor treatment raises the bar for everyone's behavior. Evolutionary perspective. Jung concluded that the empath's journey from unconscious accommodation to conscious boundaries represents humanity's evolution toward more emotionally intelligent relationships. He saw this transformation as essential for creating cultures based on mutual respect rather than exploitation of sensitivity. Jung believed that as more empaths learn healthy boundary management, they create what he called empathy tipping points, cultural shifts where emotional intelligence becomes valued and protected rather than exploited. He envisioned societies where sensitivity is recognized as psychological sophistication rather than vulnerability to be exploited. He saw integrated empaths as bridges between humanity's current emotional immaturity and its potential for conscious, respectful connection. Their journey demonstrates that evolution from unconscious accommodation to conscious choice is possible, inspiring others to develop their own emotional intelligence and boundary skills. The empath who leaves without warning and never returns isn't cruel. They're following an unconscious survival mechanism when conscious boundaries have failed completely. Jung's research reveals this pattern as psychological emergency intervention, not personal failure. But there's another path. When you learn to recognize your unconscious warning signals and trust them, when you develop the courage to set boundaries before reaching crisis points, you transform from an unconscious victim of your own empathy into a conscious creator of healthy relationships. Your sensitivity isn't your curse, it's your superpower. But like any powerful ability, it requires wisdom in application. Jung showed that the same psychological makeup that makes you vulnerable to exploitation also makes you capable of extraordinary love and connection when properly protected. The choice is yours. Remain trapped in cycles of accommodation, followed by sudden departure, or develop the conscious boundaries that allow your empathy to flourish in relationships built on mutual respect. If you've ever left without warning and never returned, comment, "I choose conscious boundaries." Your journey from unconscious escape to conscious choice isn't just personal healing, it's pioneering a healthier way of loving for everyone. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.
Have you ever felt so lonely that no words could capture it? You're still surrounded by friends, colleagues, and family. You still laugh, talk, and seem fine. But there's a smoldering silence within, unseen and untouched by anyone. We grow up without ever being taught how to be alone. From childhood, we're encouraged to fit in, to conform, to be shaped to live under the gaze of others. But then, at some point in life, often when everything around us seems perfectly normal, a strange stillness begins to spread from within. The veil of pretense falls away. This is the silent, profound loneliness, deep as an abyss, cold as stone, which Carl Jung believed is precisely the moment when the true self begins to emerge. No longer the persona, but the self, vibrant, creative, wild, and untamed. But what awaits us in that desolate wilderness? And is it possible to find light within that very darkness? In today's exploration, we'll uncover why loneliness is not a state to avoid, but a secret gateway leading to the deepest essence of your being. Stay with us until the end, because I believe, on the other side of that darkness, there's a version of you that you've never dared to touch, but have always longed to become. And that person is you. Number 1. Understanding loneliness in Jung's philosophy. In modern society, loneliness is often seen as a crack to be concealed, evidence of failure in connection, a void to be filled as quickly as possible with chatter, work, social media, or transactional relationships. People fear loneliness like a dark room, not because of what's inside, but because they don't know what might appear when the light fades. But for Carl Jung, loneliness is not the emptiness of external things, but the fullness of oneself. He distinguished clearly between aloneness and loneliness. A person can sit in a crowd and still feel loneliness to their very bones because they cannot express their authentic self, which is loneliness. Conversely, a person can withdraw from the world and, in that state, feel as if they've come home, as if they're finally hearing their voice after years of being drowned out by societal noise, that is, aloneness. Jung viewed loneliness as a psychological landscape, not a barren desert, but an invisible laboratory where your soul becomes both the subject and the observer. Without the external light shining in, you're like a photographic negative dipped in developing chemicals. Everything hidden in the shadows gradually emerges, sharp and undeniable. Loneliness, in Jung's view, is the opportunity to dismantle the layers of masks we've accumulated over the years. The mask of the dutiful child, the perfect partner, the version that makes others comfortable. The truth is, these are not us. They are temporary constructs for survival in the world, but if we cling to them too long, they become prisons. And those prisons are painted in the sweet hues of acceptance, making it hard to realize we've lost our freedom. From a psychological perspective, building a persona is natural. Children learn to read adults' emotions, pleasing their parents to be loved. Young adults bend to models of success to avoid falling behind. We adjust, adapt, blend in, all to survive. But Jung warned, if we never step out of these costumes, we'll never know what our true form looks like. And loneliness, for him, is where we begin to shed them. Have you ever turned off your phone, paused your work, sat alone in a quiet room, and felt so restless you had to get up and find something to do? That feeling isn't boredom. It's because you're not used to being alone with yourself. The mind, so dependent on external feedback, panics when the world's noise stops, like a child lost in a supermarket. Behind that restlessness lies a deeper psychological mechanism, FOMO, fear of missing out. It's not just the fear of missing information, opportunities, or trends, but the fear that if we're not connected, not present, we'll vanish from the world's map. In a society where "I'm busy" is a badge of personal worth, sitting still, doing nothing, not updating, not participating, creates a subtle guilt, as if you're falling behind. Jung didn't see this as a flaw. He saw it as a doorway. When we step through that initial unease, a new space opens, a space where the authentic self can speak, uninterrupted by others' expectations or judgments. In that silence, a form begins to emerge, no longer an imitation of someone else, but the raw, original image of you, the self. The fascinating thing is, the more we understand loneliness correctly, the less frightening it becomes. Jung once likened loneliness to a sealed room where daydreams enter and become rituals. It's where we reconnect with vivid imagination, creative unconscious, and forgotten parts of the soul. Many great creators, from Virginia Woolf to Beethoven, described loneliness as fertile ground for exploring the unknown within themselves. Thus, understanding loneliness is about freeing it from its image as a prison and seeing it as a gateway, a place where we're not left behind, but invited to return. Number 2, the creative void. If loneliness is the gateway that leads us away from the world of masks and social feedback, then the creative void Carl Jung described is the first land we step into after crossing that threshold. No longer under the stage lights, without applause or the familiar rhythm of life, we fall into a strange space where everything that once defined us suddenly dissolves. Yet, contrary to its empty appearance, this realm is brimming with potential. Jung called it the place where the old has died, but the new has not yet been born. Imagine wandering into a completely white room. No windows, no objects, no sound. You stand there, stripped of any anchor to define yourself. You're no longer someone's child, this or that person, or someone in others' eyes. There's no mirror to reflect you, no reminder of your usual role. Just you in a barren space that blurs time and direction. This is the creative void, the space between what was and what is yet to come. For many, this is a moment of crisis. In reality, you may have tasted this feeling during a major life event, losing a job, a breakup, a shift in religious identity, or a shock that shattered your inner foundation. A once successful professional realizes they no longer love their work. A parent who lives for their family feels lost when their children leave. Someone who believed in an ideal finds it crumbling. When there's nothing left to cling to, we fall into this void, where nothing remains and nothing has yet emerged. You may not have named it. But if you've felt this, you've stood on the threshold of transformation. Modern psychology calls this a liminal space, a transitional zone between two states of being. In ancient cultures, this was when the hero entered the deep forest, the monk retreated to a cave, or the pilgrim began a long journey with no clear destination. But Jung went further. He didn't see this as just a phase, but as a psychological dimension where the ego is stripped away to allow the self to take shape. Like a seed that must rot in the earth before sprouting, the ego must dissolve in this void to let something deeper rise. This is not a comfortable time. On the contrary, It often brings disorientation, confusion, anxiety, and even depression. Many who fall into the creative void describe it as drifting in a sea of fog, where everything feels blurred, meaningless, as if the values they lived for were illusions. But Jung would urge you to face that crisis and say, stay there. Don't rush to escape by reverting to old patterns. Don't grasp for new meaning just to avoid the emptiness. Because in that very emptiness, something truer is quietly forming. Jung believed the creative void is the sacred birthing room of the soul. Just as winter in nature isn't death, but a dormancy that gathers strength for spring's bloom, this empty state isn't failure, it's conscious preparation. Its pain doesn't stem from meaninglessness, but from the lack of language clear enough to describe what's forming. It's vague, nameless, ineffable. The only thing we can do is endure it with awareness. Picture the creative void as a darkroom in vintage photography. In the darkness, undeveloped photos are soaked in chemicals, waiting for details to emerge. Turn on the light too soon, and the image burns. Pull it out too quickly, and it's blurry. The human soul in the creative void is the same. It requires deep stillness, immense patience, and enduring courage to stay in the dark, letting authentic images from the deepest unconscious rise, images unswayed by others, belonging only to you. We can't skip this stage. The creative void can't be solved. It can only be lived fully. Like a caterpillar that can't shorten its time in the cocoon without dying prematurely, any attempt to return to the old self will only bring more pain, more alienation. But if you can endure, if you can accept not being anything yet, something deeper will begin to take shape. The creative void isn't just where the old dies, but where the forgotten comes alive. When the masks have melted, when familiar foundations are gone, what you buried in the shadows begins to surface, like ancient beings summoned from oblivion. It's as if the mind, cleansed of its fabricated dust, becomes quiet enough for forgotten voices to speak. And at that moment, the inner journey enters a bolder, more decisive phase, the confrontation with the shadow, the part of you that you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Number 3, confronting the shadow and the unconscious. Jung believed that every person carries a psychological shadow, a repository of emotions, thoughts, desires, and instincts that society, religion, or family taught us should not exist. Everything we've ever been ashamed of, denied, or declared, "That's not me," is compressed into the deep layers of the unconscious. But being buried doesn't mean being erased. On the contrary, these elements lie there, like molten lava simmering beneath thick earth. And when the external order collapses, when the masks no longer hold, they begin to rise. Picture the mind as a luxurious house, where the living room is always kept pristine for guests. But behind it lies a dark basement where you've tossed emotions deemed bad: anger, jealousy, envy, lust, weakness. You don't want anyone to see it, not even yourself. But one day, the power goes out. The brightly lit living room vanishes. The only light left flickers from the basement. Now you have no choice but to descend and open the door. That's when the shadow appears. In everyday life, the shadow may manifest through emotions we despise in others. Jung called this the projection of our shadow onto the external world. For instance, we may rage against someone's selfishness not because they're truly awful, but because they touch the selfish part of ourselves we've always tried to deny. Or a man who prides himself on being rational controlled and disciplined, might suddenly be haunted by dreams filled with instinctual, violent, or sexual imagery, not because he's changing, but because the repressed instincts, long suppressed, are finding their way back. The shadow is not an enemy. Jung saw it as an exiled twin sibling. It carries a vital life force we've rejected. Within that darkness lies not only violence or desire, but also wild creativity, untapped courage, and dreams once stifled for being unacceptable. This is why Jung emphasized that confronting the shadow isn't about destroying it, but reconciling with it. A woman or man taught their whole life to be kind might panic when their first wave of anger surges, as it threatens the proper image they've built. But if they dare to look deeply into that anger, they might uncover something sacred, a boundary crossed, a value trampled, a silenced voice demanding protection. If you've ever experienced a moment like this, when a rejected emotion suddenly rises and makes you see yourself differently, you can share that experience with us. Sometimes, simply writing it down is a first step toward illuminating the shadow. Confronting the shadow, according to Jung, is an inner ritual no one can perform for you. It's not mere rational analysis, but a process of recognition, acknowledgement, and integration. That is, seeing the shadow, naming it accurately, and inviting it to become part of your being, instead of banishing it back to the unconscious. This requires a rare strength, bone-deep honesty, and the acceptance that we are not only light. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. No one finds true light without daring to step into their darkness." This may sound paradoxical, but it's the foundational paradox of every journey toward healing and self-understanding. For only by facing the parts you've hidden can you become whole. No longer a falsely good person, no longer a moral actor by others' standards, but a living being, authentic, full of contradictions, yet unified from within. And in that moment, you begin to grasp a profound truth. Much of what you once called evil isn't demonic, but neglected parts of yourself yearning for love and recognition. Number 4, loneliness as the gateway to individuation. Strangely, when you've lingered long enough in the darkness, quiet enough to hear all the buried voices, that silence ceases to be empty. It begins to have a rhythm, a direction. Like a seemingly silent piece of music, the more you listen, the more you realize a subtle melody is playing, not loud, not predictable, but steadfast. That melody doesn't come from the outside world. It's woven from within, from threads of sound only you can hear. And that's when the true journey begins. The journey to become yourself, not by adding, but by shedding. Jung called this process individuation, a term that sounds abstract, but carries the weight of a lifetime, when life is no longer lived as a reflex, but as a choice. Individuation, for Jung, isn't self-improvement in the modern sense, not about accumulating achievements, building a personal brand, or boosting performance. It's not about being better or more admired. It's a slow, quiet, often chaotic process of peeling away the labels that don't belong to you and gradually realizing who you are when no longer fused with the collective. In other words, individuation doesn't make you different to stand out, but makes you whole from within. Imagine a rough stone worn randomly by wind, rain, and time. Its fragments fall away, its scratches formed by unchosen collisions. That stone is our ego, shaped by clashes with the world, by the need to become someone to be accepted. Individuation is active sculpting. For the first time, you take the chisel in hand and begin shaping from within. Not for others' admiration, but to reach the true form of your soul, always there, just covered by the dust of life. Loneliness serves as a spiritual incubator for this journey. Only in the absence of external noise can you hear the small but persistent voice of your inner self. Individuation demands private space, space to try, to fail, to repeat, to question, to accept that you'll stray from the maps of those who came before. Many feel lost in this phase, as there's no guide, no template to cling to. But that very lack of a map forces you to develop an inner compass, a sense of right-wrong, true-false, shouldn't that comes from within, not from external frameworks. A clear example is someone who leaves a stable, high-paying job to follow a path no one understands, making art, growing plants, studying meditation, and writing a book. They're often seen as lost, dreamy, or even a failure. But in many cases, they're not falling into a void. They're embarking on individuation. They're stepping away from the collective structure, where everyone shares the same values, the same standards, to explore values that truly resonate with their soul. And this isn't a retreat from humanity. On the contrary, it's becoming a human who can offer something unique to humanity. What about you? Have you ever wondered whether the things you pursue truly stem from an inner calling, or are just a well-fitted garment sewn for you by the world? Of all the choices you've made, how much is truly yours, and how much is what you learned to avoid feeling lost? Jung stressed that individuation is not synonymous with selfishness. On the contrary, those who walk this path often feel a deep responsibility to the world, not to please, but to live authentically, to give what is true. The self, having integrated the shadow and passed through the creative void, no longer craves to stand out, but to be honest. Honest enough to fail in their way, to be imperfect, to dream dreams no one else dares, and to respond instinctively to life without seeking the crowd's approval. Modern psychology confirms what Jung said nearly a century ago. Humans are only truly healthy and happy when living as unique individuals, not assimilated. Many psychological disorders today, vague anxiety, functional depression, inner emptiness, may be symptoms of living too long in a role, disconnected from the authentic self. Only by daring to step out of the collective comfort zone, enduring the feeling of being lost, different, or misunderstood, does the gate to individuation begin to open. In ancient cultures, this journey was often described as the pilgrimage into the deep forest, where the seeker left the village, bid farewell to the community, and faced nature, darkness, and trials alone. Not to become a hero, but to become themselves. And only by going deep enough into the forest, losing direction, being stripped bare, experiencing utter loneliness, did they find the only path out, the path within. Individuation, ultimately, doesn't end in a diploma, a status, or recognition. It ends each time we're brave enough to say no to what's false and yes to what's true, even if it makes us seem out of place or vague in others' eyes. For the greatest freedom is to live as yourself, and the greatest loneliness is to live forever in the shadow of another. Number 5. Connecting with the collective unconscious. As one delves deeper into the journey of individuation, it might seem that the further they go, the more isolated they become. They gradually drift away from collective norms, from external voices, and step into a realm of light and shadow that defies naming. Yet, in one of Carl Jung's most profound and paradoxical insights, the deeper we venture into our essence, the more powerfully we connect with something universal, something beyond ourselves, the collective unconscious. It's as if, by digging far enough into your soul, you touch an underground stream, not just yours, but one that belongs to all of humanity. Jung believed that beyond the personal psyche, where individual memories, experiences, and beliefs reside, humans carry a deeper, invisible, and immensely powerful psychological layer. This is the dwelling place of archetypes, universal images, symbols, and situations that recur across myths, religions, dreams, and the human imagination throughout time. The hero, the sacred mother, the betrayer, the savior, death, rebirth. These are not specific characters, but spiritual manifestations that have accompanied humanity since the days of painting on cave walls. Imagine the collective unconscious as an ancient library where each person, upon birth, is granted a membership card. You may never know you hold this card, but in moments of profound silence, when the mind moves beyond ordinary logic and engages through intuition, imagery, or symbols, you might suddenly read books no one ever taught you. This is why a young woman who has never read mythology might dream of being swallowed by the deep sea, an image that aligns perfectly with myths of goddesses like Inanna or Persephone. The collective unconscious doesn't speak in words, but in sensations, symbols, and recurring patterns found in dreams, art, and even pathology. In modern life, you may have brushed against the collective unconscious without realizing it. When a mother holds her newborn for the first time and tears fall, not from personal joy alone, but from a sense of participating in something timeless and sacred. That's not just individual maternal love, but the archetype of the mother coming alive. When you hear an ancient piece of music and are inexplicably moved, as if touching something that existed before you, it may be a memory not solely yours, but of countless people who lived, loved, and lost over thousands of years. Jung likened the collective unconscious to a psychic ocean where each individual is a tiny drop, seemingly separate but always nourished by a vast sea beneath. The paradox is this: only by detaching from societal constraints, by daring to be alone and stepping into your realm of light and shadow, can you truly feel this connection. It ceases to be an idea and becomes a living experience. You are not alone because the pain you carry, the questions you ask, the obsessions you wrestle with, may be chapters already written by countless souls before you. Modern psychology refers to this as intergenerational resonance, the phenomenon where traumas, desires, or behavioral patterns can be passed down through generations like invisible codes. A man who fears losing control without knowing why might carry the unresolved memory of a grandfather who endured war. A woman who never dares to speak her truth may be reliving the fears of mothers and grandmothers silenced in past societies. Jung went further. He believed these memories are not only transmitted through bloodlines, but through a shared unconscious layer, like a spiritual cloud we're all connected to. The deeper you individuate, the more you become a finely tuned node for sensing the collective unconscious. The most powerful creations, prophetic dreams, and sudden intuitions often arise at this intersection, where the ego no longer controls, but the self begins to channel messages from a shared source. This is where poets write verses they don't know the origin of, where artists paint images never seen before, where an ordinary person in the dead of night feels an inexplicable urge to forgive, to leave, to start anew, as if something greater than themselves has whispered. If these words stir something vague yet profound within you, perhaps you're not just absorbing content, but being reminded of a part of yourself. Please like and subscribe if you wish to continue exploring these depths, for this journey is long, and the doors ahead will be no less challenging, but undoubtedly more authentic. This is what sets Jung apart. He didn't view humans as isolated individuals, but as intersections of human history, collective spirituality, and personal renewal. When you connect with the collective unconscious, you don't dissolve into the masses. You carry all of humanity into your journey, and you begin to see that every step you take, every healing you undertake, every pain you embrace can ripple like a tremor through the collective. You are no longer alone. Through you, humanity is healing itself. From this intersection, a new door opens, not just to the self, but to an awareness of a greater life. A quieter, more haunting question emerges. If I am not just me, what is living through me? But that is another journey, deeper, more sacred. A journey where the final door leads to death. And Jung did not shy away from it. On the contrary, he walked straight toward it. Number 6. Facing death and the yearning to live authentically. Like all who have lived, loved, struggled, and vanished into dust, we too must depart. And this is the final door in the inward journey, facing death. But for Carl Jung, this is not an ending but a pivotal moment, where truth is purified, and the yearning to live authentically is ignited most fiercely. Not everyone is ready to face death, for it shatters all illusions. You may live in a relentless whirlwind, building an image, chasing goals, so busy you have no time to ask what is real. But one day, you touch the invisible chill of death, in a dream, a diagnosis, a moment when a loved one is gone. All noise ceases, all roles fall away, and an inescapable question arises. Am I living by my own choices, or am I wasting my life on others' expectations? Jung saw death as a spiritual event more than a biological one. He believed most people live in an illusion of immortality, not because they think they'll never die, but because they live as if death isn't in the room. A life without death as a companion is a shallow one, for then every choice feels deferrable. Death, for Jung, is the substance that clarifies what truly matters, like a flame illuminating a map of your life, revealing which paths lead to authentic living and which are mere loops. In reality, many experience their deepest awakening when near death, not just physical death but symbolic death, a breakup, a profound loss, bankruptcy, or the collapse of a religious belief. These moments can tear apart every layer of identity built up, but that very stripping creates space for something truly alive to emerge. Like a forest that regenerates after a fire, death, whether metaphorical or real, can pave the way for a deeper, truer life. Jung believed that only by sensing death can people break from their roles and truly connect with their soul. Someone who lived for expectations, upon learning their time is short, might suddenly return to painting, music, or nature, not for success but to live. Someone who chased perfection, nearing death, might learn to love their incompleteness, for there's no time left to perform, no fear of judgment, only the fear of not living one day fully. Jung wrote, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." In this understanding, we don't fall into despair, we awaken. For when you know your time is finite, every choice gains value. Apologies no longer wait, acts of love are no longer postponed, and you begin to live with an unprecedented clarity, a clarity that not only deepens your life, but lightens it. For you no longer carry what is untrue. In the silent presence of death, a small flame ignites. The yearning to live authentically. Not to live correctly, beautifully, or impressively, but to live with no regrets when you depart. No longer denying parts of yourself. No longer repeating behaviors just to be accepted. No longer delaying true happiness out of fear of change. Only a simple question remains, yet it can transform your entire life. If today were your last, how would you live to be worthy of yourself? Number 7. Freedom and responsibility. That question will make you live as if every moment is drafting the testament of your soul. And from that very depth, something else begins to sprout. Freedom. Not the freedom to do everything, but the freedom to live true to yourself, because there's nothing left worth trading away. And alongside that freedom, like the other side of a coin, lies something not easily swallowed: responsibility. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. That true freedom isn't as light as we imagine. It is a sacred burden every soul must bear when choosing to live authentically. When still bound by the persona, the social mask, humans live in a sweet dependency. We blame circumstances, make excuses for roles, for norms, for fear of rejection. We may be exhausted, but we're safe, because our choices are within the framework. But when we pass through the creative void, reconcile with the shadow, embark on individuation, and face death, the old milestones lose their meaning. It's like emerging from a maze to stand in an open field. No barriers, no signposts. You can go anywhere, but you can't blame anyone if you choose wrongly. That is the essence of true freedom. No limits, but no one else to take responsibility for you. Jung called this the moment when humans begin to live by consciousness rather than instinct. No longer reacting like a machine to expectations, but making deliberate choices rooted in the deepest parts of the inner self. This sounds noble, but in reality, it demands a rare courage. The courage to accept that you alone are responsible for your life, for what is lived, and for what is missed. No more, "They didn't let me." No more, "I wasn't allowed." Only, "What did I choose? And do I dare live with the consequences of that choice?" In modern psychology, this is described as a shift from an external locus of control to an internal one, from an external frame of reference to an inner one. But for Jung, it's not just a technique for self-improvement. It's the threshold of an awakened life. For only when you realize that freedom isn't a privilege, but a consequence of psychological maturity, do you truly begin to live as the creator of your reality. Imagine you're the captain of a ship. For much of your life you may have followed someone else's chart, but now there's no map, no guiding station. The only compass is your inner sense, and the course depends on whether you dare to take responsibility for each turn of the wheel. This freedom is both boundless and sacred, both soaring and sharp-edged. Jung wrote in the Red Book, "Our freedom does not lie outside us, but within us. One can be bound outside, and yet one will still feel free since one has burst inner bonds." freedom expands only in proportion to our consciousness. If we're unaware of our true inner motives, any freedom is merely a chain of unconscious, repetitive behaviors dressed up in lofty terms. Someone might quit their job to travel, thinking it's freedom, but if it's only to avoid facing their inner emptiness, it's just another form of escape wrapped in a romantic guise. True freedom is knowing why you choose, accepting what you forego, and living fully with what you embrace. In the depth of Jungian psychology, freedom isn't the final reward, but the true test of the soul. And that's why freedom is inseparable from responsibility, to yourself, to the inner voice once abandoned, to the authentic self waiting for you to choose it each day. That is the tragedy, and also the beauty of humanity, according to Jung. And if there is any salvation, it doesn't come from outside. It begins the moment you look in the mirror and, for the first time, no longer avoid your gaze. Carl Jung never promised this journey would be easy. He never sugarcoated the shadows. But he placed a map in our hands, not to avoid pain, but to understand that pain has a shape, a path. And if you're brave enough to walk straight into it, you'll find the most sacred thing. A life chosen consciously, a self no longer divided, and a freedom no one can take away because it never came from the outside. And if today you pause just for a moment to listen to the smallest voice within you, what would it say first? And do you have the courage not to ignore it anymore? For the journey begins and ends in the same place, where you stop running from yourself. And only you can know whether you're living a life of meaning or merely existing amidst imagined applause.